In this video I will cover 9 infantry division layouts from World War II. Although certain parts of the content is tailored for Hearts of Iron players, most of the information is military history. The initial remarks are specific to Hearts of Iron and the methodology I used. So if you want, you can now skip ahead and click on the annotation on the screen. Be aware though that these layouts are aimed at being as historical as possible within the Hearts of Iron 4 division builder. Thus I am not sure how well they work in Hearts of Iron 4. This is first and foremost a military history channel. Thus I am mainly here for the historical flavor, the German accent, and not to support your ambitions in conquering the world. At least for now. I won't use the division builder, since generally I try to avoid any copyrighted material, and would actually make everything more complicated and time consuming. Yet you will get in one shot the proposed Hearts of Iron 4 setup and the historical setup together. So you can basically copy it and also learn a bit about the real units too. On the homepage you can find the proper high resolution screenshots of these layouts. See the link in the description or on the screen. Some words about the methodology and accuracy. If you want to discuss these layouts, listen to this section very carefully. And if you can't wait for the layouts, you might just skip ahead by clicking the button on the screen. Well, figuring out the correct layouts can be quite complicated. You need to be aware that some divisions, especially tank divisions, change considerably throughout the war. Thus I usually provide a date for each layout. Another major pitfall is the naming. What one country called a regiment was sometimes something different in another one. Thus this was not so straightforward as it seems. Also, there were even quite some differences within each country. For example, a German tank division in 1939 had way more tanks than one in 1941. Or a US Army tank battalion in 1942 was usually larger than a US Army tank battalion after the reorganization of September 1943. Well, except for 2 divisions of the 16 armored divisions. Hence my approach was as follows. It consisted of looking at the data in Hearts of Iron, checking the historical division layouts, and then comparing the information to the equipment and manpower tables to see if the numbers match for the different units and organizations. This process revealed quite some interesting information about Hearts of Iron. First, I looked at the data of Hearts of Iron, namely how many manpower and equipment each unit had. This confirmed my assumption that the so-called support companies are more like support battalions. Only the 3 smallest ones, the engineer, anti-aircraft and artillery company, had 300 men. The others have 400 or even 500 men. Whereas companies were usually 100 to 200 men. Furthermore, the number of artillery guns for an artillery battalion in game is 36. Whereas in real life, this was the number of 3 battalions, at least for the German and US Army infantry divisions. I don't know if this is an error on behalf of Paradox Entertainment or if an artillery battalion in-game actually should represent a regiment, or maybe it's for gameplay balancing reasons. For this video I assume that an artillery battalion in-game is also an artillery battalion historically. If this is not the case, just divide the number of proposed artillery battalions by 3 and you should be fine. As you can see, it's a bit complicated. Thus take all of the following information with a grain of salt, because I had to use a wide variety of sources of different quality and level of detail, which is problematic in it itself, but additionally the chances for error increase due to the variety and amount of data. To balance this, I usually added a short explanation why or why not I went with the proposed setup, and provide the basic data for my reasoning. So let's get started. The Allied grand strategy in World War II was Germany first, and it worked out. So let's begin with the German infantry division from 1940. It consists of an engineer battalion, an anti-tank battalion, a recon battalion, an artillery regiment, which consists of a heavy artillery battalion and 3 regular artillery battalions. Additionally, a signal battalion, and finally 3 infantry regiments, each with 3 infantry battalions. Now the division didn't have a dedicated medical battalion, but it had 2 medical companies, a field hospital and 2 medical transport columns with almost 700 men in total. Thus I would say this qualifies as a medical battalion. Additionally, it also had a maintenance and a logistics unit attached. So this unit was very well equipped. The only type it definitely didn't possess was an anti-aircraft unit. the division used solely heavy machine guns for anti-aircraft defense. Now the German infantry division had almost 17,000 men, thus my proposed Hearts of Iron 4 setup is as follows. For support units, an engineer, anti-tank, recon, signal and medical unit. The regular 3x3 infantry battalions should get additional 2 battalions due to the large amount of men in the division, and finally 4 artillery battalions. Note that for all divisions the non-combat units, logistics, medical and maintenance are the most debatable, because in my sources this information is often not included or limited. Furthermore, their functions sometimes were performed by non-divisional units in several armies. I hope you have your hammer and sickle ready. Next is the Soviet Rifle Division from April 1941. It consists of a signal battalion, a medical battalion, a supply battalion, an anti-tank battalion, an anti-aircraft battalion, a light artillery regiment with 2 battalions, a sapper battalion, 1 howitzer regiment with 2 battalions and 1 heavy battalion, a recon battalion and 3 infantry regiments with 3 battalions each. Yeah, this one seems to tick off all the boxes, yet in total the division had only around 14,500 men. But let's take a closer look at the data. Now the number of 5 artillery battalions sound impressive, and the firepower is also clearly more than that of the US and German unit. The number of heavy artillery above 150mm is the same, yet whereas the US and German units used a 105mm gun, the Soviets used a 122mm howitzer, although 4 less, but additionally they had several 76mm howitzers and cannons, which means that the firepower in artillery at least is equal if not greater than that of the German division. Furthermore, the total number of 54 anti-tank guns is lower than the German division but similar to the US setup. Based on this data, my proposed Hearts of Iron setup is as follows. For support units, an engineer, medical, recon, signal and logistical unit. Then the regular 3x3 infantry battalion, to these we add 1 anti-tank and 1 anti-aircraft battalion. Finally, definitely 4, if not 5 artillery battalions. Now I think it's time for a little bit of freedom. So let's take a look at the US Army Infantry Division from July 1943. It consists of a medical battalion, an engineer battalion, a divisional artillery unit with a heavy artillery battalion and 3 artillery battalions. And finally 3 infantry regiments, each with 3 infantry battalions. In total this division had around 13,000 men. Now here's the problem. The US Army division had a recon unit, a signal company, a quartermaster company and a maintenance company. But all these units had less than 200 men, unlike the German units before. Yet looking at the data, I realized that the division in total had 57 anti-tank guns, which was just short of the 75 from the German division that had some deployed in the recon battalion. Hence my proposed Hearts of Iron 4 setup is as follows. 4 support units, an engineer, an anti-tank and a field hospital unit. Then the regular 3x3 infantry battalions and finally 4 artillery battalions. Now the German recon unit consisted to a large part of cavalry and only a few armored cars, whereas the US unit had half-tracks and 13 armored M8 cars. Thus one could argue that the recon unit could be added as an additional support unit. Next up, something for those people who love tea. The British Infantry Division in 1939 of the British Expeditionary Force. Now the British unit names were a bit different. They used the name brigades and regiments. Although those units usually only had the manpower and equipment of regiments and battalions. I will use the original names but use symbols that represent the actual strength. The division consists of a division cavalry regiment that was mechanized, an engineer battalion, a divisional artillery unit that consists of 3 artillery regiments and 1 anti-tank regiment. Furthermore, a supply unit and a medical unit. And finally, 3 infantry brigades, each with 3 infantry battalions. In total the division had a bit short of 14,000 men. Based on this information, my proposed Hearts of Iron 4 layout is as follows. For support units, an engineer, a medical, a recon, an anti-tank and a logistics unit. Now although the number of anti-tank guns was only 48, the unit had a large amount of anti-tank rifles and the French provided anti-tank guns for the British divisions. Thus an anti-tank unit seems justified. Then the regular 3x3 infantry battalions, and finally 3 or 4 artillery battalions, because the British fielded 72 field guns of the 18 and/or 25 pounder type. Furthermore, the unit was quite well motorized and even mechanized, with 140 Brand carriers. Thus one actually could replace the regular infantry with motorized or mechanized infantry. Now the war situation may not necessarily develop to your advantage, nevertheless let's take a look at the Japanese infantry division Standard B around 1940. Note that these divisions varied to a certain degree. It consists of an engineer regiment, a transport regiment, a recon or cavalry regiment, division medical services, a field artillery regiment with 3 artillery battalions, and 3 infantry regiments with 3 battalions each. Note that these artillery battalions were equipped with 75mm guns, thus having far less firepower than all other nations. Yet these divisions had a very high amount of manpower, depending on the setup, between 18 to 21,000 men, thus even outnumbering the German division by far. Based on this data, my proposed Hearts of Iron 4 layout is as follows. For support units, an engineer, a medical, a recon and a logistical unit. The regular 3x3 infantry battalions should get probably an additional 6 battalions. Finally, I think 1 artillery battalion or at most 2 battalions, considering the rather weak firepower of the 75mm howitzer in contrast to the equipment of other nations. Now everybody loves pizza, but I only can offer you one slice today. Time to look at the Italian infantry division setup of 1940. It consists of an engineer battalion, a so-called legion of fascist militia that consists of 2 battalions, a regiment of artillery with a light gun battalion, a light howitzer battalion and a regular howitzer battalion. Finally 2 infantry regiments, which consist of 3 battalions each. Yes, only 2 infantry regiments, this was the so-called binary division layout the Italians used. It also had an anti-tank company, but in total there's 24 anti-tank guns. In total this division had 13,000 men. Now my sources in this one are a bit varied. I have a good German source with the overall numbers and high-level organization. But for more detailed information I rely on the Handbook on the Italian Forces from 1943, which was created by the US military intelligence during the war. So it might not be 100% accurate, but so far these handbooks are usually quite reliable in terms of unit organizations. Based on this information, my proposed Hearts of Iron 4 setup is as follows. For support units, an engineer unit, and with 3 eyes closed, an anti-tank unit. For infantry, we use 2x3 infantry battalions and then an additional 2 battalions. But maybe a third or even fourth, because the total number of men is similar to that of the US Army Infantry Division, which had way more support units. Finally, I think 1 or maybe 2 artillery battalions, because in total there were 24 guns with 75mm and 12 howitzers with 100mm present. Well, after some pizza, who doesn't want to enjoy a baguette? So let's look at the French Infantry Division of 1940. It consists of a recon group, a field gun regiment with 3 battalions, a howitzer regiment with 1 heavy howitzer battalion and a regular one, 3 infantry regiments with 3 battalions each. Additionally, there were several anti-tank companies with a total of 58 anti-tank guns and 2 engineered companies, which were originally organized in a battalion but reorganized in 1939. In total, the division had around 17,500 men. But note that in this case my sources are quite sparse and of limited quality. Nevertheless, my proposed Hearts of Iron 4 layout is as follows. For support units, an engineer unit, an anti-tank unit and a recon unit. The regular 3x3 infantry battalions should get an additional 3 battalions, because the division had more men than the German division and also less support units. For the artillery battalions, I think 3 are in order, because 36 field guns with 75mm, 12 howitzers with 105mm and 12 howitzers with 155mm were part of the division. So in case you want to go into space, here's the Polish Infantry Division organization for 1939. In this case my data is way more limited than with previous divisions, especially in terms of support units. So keep a bit of salt ready. The division consists of an engineer battalion, a light artillery regiment consisting of 2 light artillery battalions and 1 regular artillery battalion. It also had a small detachment with bigger guns, but overall it couldn't compete with the US or German divisions in this regard. And as usual, it had 3 infantry regiments, each with 3 infantry battalions. It had several medical units, but I have no numbers. Nevertheless, I assume it would be sufficient for a medical battalion. Similar to the German division, the Polish division had around 16,500 men. The division had quite many companies attached, like several anti-tank, a bicycle, an MG and a cavalry company. Thus one could argue that these units qualify together as a recon and or anti-tank unit, although the total number of anti-tank guns was only 27 guns, which is less than half of the US infantry division. Based on that data, my proposed Hearts of Iron 4 setup is as follows. For support units, an engineer, a medical, maybe a recon, and with 2 eyes closed, an anti-tank unit. The regular 3x3 infantry battalions should get 2 additional battalions, 2 artillery battalions, and maybe a third artillery battalion. And for the last division layout for this video, you might hold a stake already. The setup is for the Romanian infantry division of 1941. It consists of a recon battalion, an engineer battalion, a field artillery regiment with 2 light battalions and a regular battalion, an artillery regiment with a light artillery battalion and a regular battalion, and 3 infantry regiments with 3 infantry battalions each. Additionally, it had an anti-tank and an anti-aircraft company. Furthermore, each of the regiments had an anti-tank company, but these units were usually not sufficiently equipped. In total, it would be around 30 anti-tank guns. About the signal and medical units, my source for the layout on the Romanian units is good, but it doesn't include any non-combat units. Yet since the author notes that the communication and main equipment was quite poor, one can assume there was no state-of-the-art signal unit present and the medical services were probably lacking. The division in total was a bit short of 17,000 men. Thus it is quite a large force, especially considering the low number of additional units. Based on this information, my proposed Hearts of Iron 4 setup would be, for support units, an engineer, a recon, and with 2 eyes closed, an anti-tank unit. The regular 3x3 infantry battalions should get probably at least an additional 3 battalions. Finally, I think 2 artillery battalions, because in total there were 36 field guns with 75mm and 16 howitzers with 100mm present. Now all of these layouts are available as images on the homepage. Check out the links in the description. There you can also find a link to the script with all the sources and further links. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, share and subscribe. And see you next time.